daughter of gold, child of dust. A girl raised on praise believes she is above everyone. When disgrace follows her selfish choices, she discovers that true worth is earned through character, not birth. Before we continue, please like, share and subscribe. Adaeze was born into comfort in the heart of Umuocha, an Igbo community known for its fertile land and strong traditions. Her father, Chief Okiri, was a respected man, wealthy in barns of yam and influence among elders. Her mother, Ngozi, raised Adaeze as her only child, adorning her with coral beads and soft praises that never seemed to end. From childhood, Adaeze heard one truth repeated like a song: "You are special." No chore was demanded of her, no mistake truly corrected. When she spoke rudely, people laughed it off. When she disrespected others, they blamed her youth, never her character. As she grew older, Adaeze began to believe that respect was owed to her simply because of her birth. She walked through the village with her head high, her wrapper always clean, her hands untouched by work. She scoffed at girls who carried firewood or fetched water from the stream. "I was not born for suffering," she would say, her voice sharp with pride. Her parents noticed the change, the impatience in her tone, the contempt in her eyes, but they feared that correcting her would make her resent them. So they chose silence, and silence fed her arrogance. The day shame first knocked on their door came during a village meeting at the Obi, where elders gathered to settle disputes. When Elder Namdi spoke about humility and respect, Adaeze laughed loudly and dismissed his words as old-fashioned. The gathering fell into an uneasy quiet. Eyes turned toward Chief Okiri, whose face burned with embarrassment. That night, whispers followed Adaeze home, whispers that spoke not of beauty or wealth, but of a child raised in gold who had forgotten the dust beneath her feet. The whispers that followed Adaeze home that evening did not fade with the night. By morning, they had settled firmly into the air of Umuocha like harmattan dust, silent, persistent, impossible to ignore. Women at the stream lowered their voices when Adaeze passed. Young men who once greeted her eagerly now nodded stiffly or turned away. Even children, sharp-eyed and unfiltered, stared at her with a mix of curiosity and judgment. Adaeze noticed the change, but instead of reflecting, she dismissed it as jealousy. "They envy what they can never have," she told herself, tightening her wrapper and lifting her chin higher. Within her father's compound, tension grew quietly. Chief Okiri sat longer at the Obi, listening more than speaking. His wealth had earned him respect for years, but respect in Umuocha was tied not only to riches, it was tied to family conduct. Each careless act by Adaeze now reflected directly on him. Ngozi, her mother, sensed the shift too. She tried gently to speak to her daughter, choosing her words like fragile pottery. "Adaeze, my child," she said one afternoon, "a person is known not by what she owns, but by how she treats others." Adaeze laughed, brushing past her. "Mama, people respect us because of Papa. Nothing will change that." But change had already begun. At the next market day, Adaeze disgraced her parents openly. Angered by a minor inconvenience, she insulted a poor palm oil seller, accusing her of incompetence. When the woman pleaded, Adaeze's words only grew sharper. The market fell silent. An elder woman stepped forward and rebuked her publicly, reminding her that no one stood above another in the eyes of the land. News of the incident traveled fast, reaching the council of elders before sunset. That night, Chief Okiri was summoned. He returned home heavy with shame. For the first time, his anger broke through his restraint. "I gave you comfort," he told Adaeze sternly, "but I failed to give you wisdom." Adaeze, stunned and offended, saw not correction but betrayal. She stormed into her room, convinced that the village was turning against her unfairly. She did not yet understand that Umuocha was not punishing her, it was preparing to teach her. And the lesson would come not with words, but with loss. Weeks passed after the market incident, and the weight of whispers grew heavier in Adaeze's life. No longer was she the girl who could command attention with a toss of her head or the flash of her coral beads. Invitations to gatherings dwindled. Friends she once considered beneath her stopped visiting. Even her favorite servant, Chica, began to avoid her presence, muttering excuses to leave the compound before Adaeze could demand her attention. The girl who once moved like a queen in Umuocha now felt the chill of isolation, though she stubbornly refused to admit it. Her first taste of disgrace came on a market trip meant to flaunt her beauty and wealth. She had insisted on accompanying her mother to buy yams, wearing her most vibrant wrappers and the heaviest coral beads. When she demanded the best yams and scolded the traders for what she considered their laziness, the villagers no longer smiled or flattered. Instead, they exchanged glances and murmured among themselves. One bold trader refused to serve her, saying, "Respect is earned, not commanded, daughter of gold." Adaeze's face burned crimson, coral beads clinking nervously around her neck. She stomped away, humiliated in public for the first time. That evening, in the quiet of her room, Adaeze tried to brush off the sting. It was only one person, she murmured to herself. Yet, deep inside, a seed of unease took root. For the first time, she noticed the absence of the praise she had always relied upon. Her father, busy with village affairs, avoided correcting her now, not because he approved, but because he had realized that protection could not shield her from natural consequence. Her mother's gentle warnings no longer reached her stubborn heart. By the week's end, her pride began to crack, though she refused to admit it. She stumbled through her days, feeling the cold weight of whispers pressing down, wondering why the world had turned against her. Adaeze did not yet understand that these were the first lessons of humility, lessons that would demand far more than embarrassment to teach. The weeks of whispered disapproval slowly chipped away at Adaeze's confidence. She wandered through the compound as if moving through a crowd of ghosts, noticing the way the servants lowered their eyes when she passed and how the neighbors spoke less warmly when she visited. Her beauty, once her armor, now felt like a fragile mask, unable to shield her from the judgment of her community. Even her friends began avoiding her, gossiping in corners about the once proud girl who had mocked her elders. Adaeze felt anger bubble inside her, but with it came a gnawing fear she had never known, a fear of being powerless. The breaking point came one morning when she demanded that Chica prepare a lavish breakfast for her and her mother before the sun rose. Chica, tired of insults and impatience, refused. "I will not serve one who refuses to honor the labor that feeds her," she said calmly. Adaeze's face flushed crimson with rage, and she tried to strike the girl, but her mother intervened, placing a firm hand on Adaeze's shoulder. "This is what happens when pride outweighs respect," Ngozi said, her voice trembling but steady. "Even those who serve you have dignity, and one day, Adaeze, you will learn that dignity is worth more than gold." The word struck deeper than any insult could. Adaeze fled to the courtyard, wrapping her arms around herself, her coral beads clinking softly like a warning bell. For the first time, she understood what it meant to be powerless. The villagers no longer feared her, the world she had always considered her stage had grown distant, and she was no longer the shining star. Even her father's stern glance now seemed to weigh heavier than his wealth. That afternoon, she wandered near the stream outside Umuocha, where she had once mocked the water carriers. Seeing them haul heavy buckets from the river with patience and perseverance, Adaeze felt a flicker of shame. For the first time, she realized that the world was not built on wealth alone. Respect, kindness, and humility were what held the community together, and her arrogance had placed her outside it. The humiliation at home and the cold stares in the village began to follow Adaeze into every corner of her life. Her pride, once as dazzling as her coral beads, now felt heavy and suffocating. She could no longer ignore the emptiness behind the laughter of others or the pointed whispers she had once dismissed. Even her father, Chief Okari, who had always shielded her, now allowed the natural consequences of her arrogance to teach her what words never could. One morning, he called her to the courtyard with a quiet seriousness she had never seen in him before. "Adaeze," he said, "wealth can buy comfort, but it cannot buy respect. You have walked above the dust of your people, thinking it beneath you, but one day you will see that the dust is what holds the world together. You cannot escape it, and you cannot ignore it." Adaeze tried to hide her shame, but her father's words sank deep into her heart. She felt a sudden emptiness where confidence had once flourished, and for the first time, she wished she had listened to her mother's gentle warnings. A week later, Chief Okari sent Adaeze to live with his distant relatives in a neighboring village. The decision was not punishment, it was a chance for her to learn humility. The village was smaller, less wealthy, and the houses were simple mud and thatch. Adaeze was expected to help with chores, fetch water from the river, and participate in daily life. At first, she resisted, complaining and refusing to do the work. But when the other girls welcomed her only if she joined in the labor, she had no choice but to comply. Each day, the sun beat down on her as she carried water and swept the compound, and each night, her body ached in ways she had never experienced. Through these small trials, Adaeze began to see what she had missed in Umuocha, the quiet pride of those who worked, the strength and patience, and the dignity in helping others. She realized that her past arrogance had been a shield against understanding, and now the shield had been stripped away. For the first time, she felt the true weight of humility pressing on her, and though it was uncomfortable, it was also awakening something new within her, a recognition that true worth could not be inherited, it had to be earned. The days in the neighboring village stretched long, yet slowly, Adaeze began to transform. No longer wrapped in silk and endless praise, she felt the rhythm of life in the dust beneath her feet and the sweat on her palms. Fetching water from the river became a meditation, sweeping the compound taught her patience. Even chores she once considered beneath her dignity, grinding yam, tending to the chickens, helping the younger children, began to carry lessons she had never anticipated. Each task reminded her that the world was not shaped by wealth or birth alone, but by the care, effort, and respect people showed toward each other. The other girls, initially wary of her arrogance, gradually accepted Adaeze, but only as one willing to learn. One afternoon, while helping Amaka, a girl known for her resilience, mend a torn wrapper, Amaka said softly, "You have talent, Adaeze, but talent is nothing without respect. True strength comes from knowing yourself and honoring those around you." The words sank deeply, echoing the lessons she had ignored in Umuocha. Adaeze felt a stirring she had never known, humility, not shame, understanding, not defiance. Her nights were spent thinking of her parents, especially her mother, Ngozi, who had always tried to guide her gently. Adaeze realized how her selfishness had caused them pain, how her pride had cast a shadow over the love and sacrifice that had raised her. She began writing letters she would never send, confessing her regrets and promising herself that she would return a better person. Each letter was a seed planted in the soil of her conscience, growing into a desire to rebuild her character, not for praise, but for true integrity. By the end of the month, Adaeze's laughter had changed. It was no longer sharp and haughty, it carried warmth and a quiet strength. Even the elders in the neighboring village began to notice the shift. They allowed her to help in communal tasks, not as a guest, but as one earning her place among them. Adaeze began to understand that humility was not submission, it was strength that grew in silence, patience, and service. She no longer feared the dust beneath her feet, she had begun to see it as the very foundation of life itself. Months passed, and Adaeze returned to Umuocha, not as the proud, golden child who had once scorned her village, but as a young woman shaped by humility and reflection. Her coral beads were lighter now, worn with care rather than display, and her steps no longer demanded attention. The compound that once felt like a stage for her beauty now welcomed her quietly, as if waiting to see whether she had truly learned the lessons life had pressed upon her. Her parents, Chief Okari and Ngozi, met her at the gate with cautious hope. Their eyes searched hers for arrogance but found only steadiness and sincerity. Adaeze's first act upon returning was simple yet profound, she knelt to greet the elders she had once mocked. Her voice, soft but confident, spoke words of apology, not for fame or attention, but for genuine remorse. "I have been blind," she said, "but I have learned that respect and love cannot be bought. They must be earned every day." The elders murmured among themselves, nodding, for they recognized the change not just in her words, but in her demeanor. The villagers, who had watched her fall and vanish, now saw her walk humbly among them, helping with chores, listening more than speaking, and treating everyone, from the youngest child to the oldest matron, with consideration. Her parents felt pride unlike anything they had known. Wealth had never been the measure of a person, character had always been the true test. Adaeze, once a child of gold, had become a child of dust, and in embracing the dust, she had discovered her worth. The village began to speak of her not as the girl who disgraced her family, but as the young woman who had returned with wisdom and humility. She led by example, showing that strength lies in kindness, that power lies in service, and that the greatest honor a person can earn is the respect of those around them. In time, Adaeze realized that her fall had been a gift. The lessons of humility she had learned in the neighboring village became the foundation of her life in Umuocha. She no longer measured herself by wealth or beauty but by the way she treated others and the care she put into her actions. The girl who had once walked above the dust now understood that the dust itself carried the weight of life, and in serving it, she had truly risen. And in that rising, Adaeze became whole.